Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Sarah Hutchinson at yogabeyondtheposes.com. I'm a registered nurse, a multi-certified yoga teacher, an Ayurvedic educator, a mother, a grandmother, and like you, a human being, making my way through a complex world. And I'm here today to talk to you about healing. I'm going to let you in on my own healing for those of you who are following my health journey with metabolic syndrome. And I'm going to talk about some of the principles of what I call mind, body, and spiritual healing, which is what I've been experiencing since I was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome in May. I want to give you the update and also give you something to take away that I hope will serve you as you navigate this complex world, aging, which we all are, regardless of what age we are, and the multiplicity of factors that come to bear on our health and well-being in our bodies, in our minds, and also in our spirit, in our soul, in that deepest level of us. All of these things are under assault with the multiple stimulations of today's world. And I want to give you some tools to take away. Now, many of you know my story. I'm in my 60s. I'm a healthcare professional, and I have been for 40 years. I've worked in the field of nursing and done almost everything there is to do as a nurse. I've also always been a health educator, and in order to keep myself healthy because of stress and tight hamstrings, I turned to yoga about 20 years ago, and I found it to have a healing system that extended well beyond the mat into vibrant health, longevity, injury prevention, disease prevention, mind clarity. There's a whole enormous list of what the art and science and yoga can give to us. And so I've really worked it hard, worked it extensively. I've gotten very involved in teaching and educating in Ayurveda, and I've incorporated a lot of Ayurveda, yoga sister science, into my own life. So imagine my surprise when I got into my 60s, I really began to feel that my health was deteriorating. I'd worked my whole life to be healthy, and I'm an incredibly healthy person, and yet in my 60s I began to experience profound fatigue, sugar cravings, and prolonged low moods. Now, this was very new to me personally, but I had seen it before. You see, it runs in my family. Depression, anxiety, fatigue, weight gain, unexplained medical problems that I watched my mother and grandmother suffer from and stood by helplessly with all of my Western medical knowledge. I thought, how can I help these two women who are suffering? Now, this is my family. And I was bound and determined to not go down that same road. And yet in my 60s, I turned that corner and began to have some of these same symptoms. So you see, my thesis here is that we are part of a lineage. And not only do we inherit our DNA from our ancestors, so that we show up with our brown hair, our blue eyes, our particular height and weight, but we also inherit from them the resonance of their experience. And these two things potently combine to create our health in our minds, our bodies, and our spiritual health as well. And so my endeavor has been to understand that and to work with that momentum to live my healthiest and best life holistically. So let's talk about that a little bit. And first, I'm going to give you the update. I was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome in May. And what is this? It's a very common condition. Most people who have metabolic syndrome don't look as healthy as I do. Many are very overweight. Why? Because their insulin resistance is high. They've got a lot of insulin in their system, but because of issues on the cell wall, the insulin cannot deliver the energy into the cell. So, in other words, this is scientifically described as insulin resistance, where there are docks on the cell and the insulin molecule can't dock correctly because the docks are rusty. Another way of looking at this from a holistic standpoint is that the cells cannot receive nourishment. Okay, I want you to hold that thought because we're going to be talking about that. My cells were unable to receive the nourishment that they needed. So what was I doing? I was wandering around craving carbohydrates and sugar because my cells were starving. And yet, even though I ate these things, the nourishment couldn't get in. This had a tremendous biochemical effect on me. And again, fatigue, depression, and sugar cravings that were putting me on the same road that I watched my mother and my grandmother go down. So what did I do? I began looking around for some help. And I knew that I needed to step away from any kind of dogmatic approach of just going to healers in Ayurveda, acupuncture, and massage. I needed to really open my mind to where the help might be. Because I'm a Western medical scientist, it wasn't that hard, but I knew that a regular medical doctor was not probably going to be able to help me out. In fact, my regular medical doctor, who I deeply respect and who is very holistic, looked at my lab work and pronounced me perfectly healthy, not knowing why I felt the way I did. And so I decided on a functional medicine approach. And after interviewing a couple of functional medicine doctors, I was intuitively drawn to a functional medicine Dr. Brad Rackman in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and entered into a patient-healer relationship with him. He interviewed me, he mapped out my health goals, and we dove in. Now, in my mind, functional medicine is the evolution of Ayurveda. Functional medicine doctors, many of them are the modern Ayurveds. They're working with lifestyle, they're working holistically, they're working with mind, body, and spirit. And so here I was engaged with a functional medicine doctor. He sees lab work as critical. And yes, I know there are people who have contacted me who have been very concerned that functional medicine really isn't proven, that all the lab work can be expensive and perhaps unnecessary. But with my background, combined with my intuition, my interest in science, and my keen intuition that comes from my yoga and meditation practice, I knew that this was the approach for me. So since May, I've had labs drawn every 8 to 10 weeks, and we've been tracking the progress of my insulin resistance. I engaged in some lifestyle changes, specifically a low glycemic diet, high intensity interval training, which I do on YouTube 5 days a week. It's not really that complicated. And targeted supplementation that was carefully prescribed to me by Dr. Rackman. And as a result, as of January, the insulin resistance is resolved. Yay. And I knew it because I felt so much better. My eyesight improved. I'm nearsighted, and I realized I wasn't using my glasses as much. So I knew something biochemically was different. My energy's back, my mood is established, my sugar cravings are down. I feel great. And so I wasn't at all surprised when those labs came back and Dr. Rackman said, look at this, it's done. We've used epigenetics to heal you. Now, what does that mean? So I have a genetic predisposition to being insulin resistant, but using lifestyle and determination and some other factors that I'll talk about, we were able to manipulate those genetic gates and that genetic code to heal the insulin resistance. So I'm absolutely thrilled that this is my experience. I have some other health stuff I'm working on that I'll bring you in on another video, but for now, the biggie, the insulin resistance, is laid down, and I'm humbled and thrilled. And so I have some takeaways and some things that I want to give you today in case it can be helpful for you with whatever health challenge you might be looking at. So let's get started and look back here. I've got my sticky notes so I can do the reveal for you. So again, this is mind, body, spirit healing. Make no mistake, you're more than just your body. I can tell you that after 40 years as a registered nurse, 10 as an Ayurvedic educator, 20 as an ardent yoga practitioner, you're more than just your body. And if you've ever had a dream that foretold something, a deep intuition that led you somewhere, you know that this is true. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because many of you out there have had things happen in your lives that indicate that you're more than just your body. We are layers. And we are containers of awareness. And as we cultivate those awarenesses, this is how we find ourselves healing our minds, our bodies, and our spirit. It's a bigger conversation, but this is the intro. So here's one of the first precepts, one of the first principles that I really believe everybody should keep in mind, which is to keep an open mind. You get that diagnosis, you have that thing going on, and your mind may close off. You may default to old patterns. You may do what I did, which is to go into denial. It took me months to find and retain the services of a functional medicine doctor because I just wanted it to go away, okay? But when I opened my mind, and again, this is common sense, but I know that I need to repeat it because I needed this in order to heal. Let your mind be open. Be very, very curious, and be sure to avoid dogma. Now, what do I mean by this? I mentioned it earlier when I said that I'm very committed to holistic ways of healing. And I hang out with a lot of people that say, I don't go to the doctor. I just go to my Ayurvedic physician. I just see my acupuncturist. I use Chinese medicine. Those medical doctors, they really goofed me up years ago. And there are many stories where we have felt that we may not have been adequately cared for in the medical system. But guess what? That doesn't mean that the science isn't there and that the healers aren't embedded in that system, because they are. So if you get dogmatic and you fall back on that misapprehension that there's nothing for you in modern science or by going to a clinic or a hospital, you're going to miss out on some healing. Remember that one of the fundamental things that we know, according to yogic wisdom, is it's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you do know that's wrong. So think about that for a minute. It's not the absence of knowledge, but it's the misapprehension that often gets us into trouble. I'm calling that dogma here, and what my message to you is, you get that diagnosis or your loved one gets that diagnosis, you're dealing with feeling a certain way, stay curious, keep your mind open, and avoid dogma. That way you will find the people, the science, and the wisdom that you need to come back into your full wholeness. Okay, second really important thing, and research proves this time and time again, we need a clear intention. Now, what is a clear intention? A clear intention is a goal. It may be a goal to heal. For me, it was a goal to decrease my insulin resistance and to look at my lab work come back into normal range. That was a goal. Ultimately, my goal evolved into an intention, and my intention was to heal the ancestral pattern that this insulin resistance came from. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So an intention is often more dimensional than a goal. It's perfectly appropriate for me to have said I want my labs to be in normal limits. But as I expanded my awareness into the circumstance I found myself in, I found one of the root causes of my illness to be ancestral. And so healing the ancestral wound became my intention, and my intention has been fulfilled. So this is something that I work with. There are many other people out there that can help you understand how to develop a clear intention, crystal clear, and it shoots like an arrow because you write it and you speak it daily. And this way, you've got the law of attraction, if you will, on your side, and things can show up for you. Because what you're doing here is you're combining intuition, your deep knowing, with science. Love modern science, make no mistake about it, with social support. And I'm going to add another one. I'm going to call this ancient wisdom. Now, don't be thrown off by that word ancient. In fact, maybe the better thing to call it is time-tested wisdom. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's time-tested wisdom. And if you look at modern science, we recognize that apples are cleansing for the lymphatic system, and they have a lot of fiber in them. They have a lot of vitamin C. Indeed, they're very health-enhancing. So an apple a day keeps the doctor away is time-tested wisdom that squares up with science. Now, when you add your intuition, your deeper knowing into that, you supercharge these things. And then the other key thing here is what I'm calling social support. And that's the idea of choosing who you're spending time with, choosing the people who are supporting you through your health challenge. Very, very important to be around the people who aren't going to turn away from it. They're not going to gloss over it. They're not going to give you a tough time about it. But the people who can be very sensitive to your health journey and support you. Don't get isolated. Get the right social support. When all of these places come together, you get this sweet spot. And it took me a couple of months to organize myself into this sweet spot, and I knew when I had gone astray, and I would say, which one of these had dropped away? Maybe I was hanging out with the wrong people, or maybe I'd withdrawn and gotten a little too isolated, and then my mind was taking over with the negative spin. Then I would up my positive social support. Maybe I needed a little more contemplative time, a little more quiet time. Maybe I was consuming too much media, and there wasn't enough spaciousness to invite a deep awareness that could guide me. And so I would increase my intuition. From a science standpoint, I didn't do a ton of Googling. I didn't want to second guess my doctor, but I did enough to be assured, and I stayed very, very compliant with the science that he gave me. And then this time-tested wisdom, I kept with my Ayurvedic practices. And again, you can learn more about that from me at another time, but the simple Ayurvedic practices of staying in circadian rhythm, allowing me to sleep well, allowing me to digest well, staying in that daily rhythm held me through the whole thing. You're looking for the sweet spot. This is the place of healing. Okay, some more concrete tips and takeaways for you. I've mentioned this before, and this is critical, and I didn't learn this in nursing school. Know your family health history. Now, it goes without saying that first you know your own health history. It's helpful to write it down. If your parents are still living, talk to them. What kind of illnesses did I have when I was a kid? Tell me a little bit about my birth. Was I sick as a baby? Was I breastfed? Ask, 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 ask. And narrate your own personal health history. Then do the same thing for your family. Find out about your siblings' state of health. Your parents, if they're deceased, what did they die from? What about your grandparents? What about aunts and uncles? Find out as much as you can about your family health history. Write it down. Commit it to memory. Recognize that this is a pattern that you exist in and that you're carrying the momentum of many of those things that you'll see in health history. You know, we call this genetics, and I mentioned epigenetics. You want to know what your family's genetic history is, because then you can get involved in altering that. It's far more mutable than we thought it was. And so know your family health history. And then to add to that, we're going to take it another layer deeper, because I know everybody that's watching can do that, and I know you want it. I'm going to encourage you to discover your ancestral health patterns. Okay, discover. So you got to go like an explorer. You got to go and discover ancestral. This doesn't just mean family. This means your ancestors, your whole line, way back. Health patterns, a little different than health history. Because health patterns will mean even what your people, where they lived. What were the patterns of living? What kind of diet did your people have? Do they come from a Mediterranean diet or a Northern European diet? You know, we've learned a lot about these influences. Find that out. What are the ancestral health patterns? And what's the ancestral health pattern of the mind and of the spirit? Were your relatives persecuted? This is going to be significant. The resonance of that persecution. Say you come from a family line that suffered through the Holocaust. There are implications for you because the resonance of that history is in your DNA. So know your ancestral health patterns. And now I've put here very boldly, heal them. Heal them because you can. And in one of my videos, if you look back in this series, you'll see me talking about Tarpana. It's a simple ritual that anybody can do that helps inform you about ancestral health patterns and to heal them. More on that at another time. And the final concrete tip I want to give you, the practical wisdom tip, is to manage your mind. And you're going to hear me talking about managing your mind more and more and more because guess what? It's the first thing in the lineup here. How do you perceive yourself? How are you perceiving the world? If you look in all the wisdom traditions, you understand that it's our perception of ourself and our perception of the world that forms our reality. And so learning to manage that through mind management is critical to your healing journey. Couple quick things about that. Managing your mind means knowing that you have a mind and that it has parts to it, and each one of those parts has a different job. I'll be teaching more about that at another time. Managing your mind means being aware of your thoughts. You know, we manage our money, the bank, financial advisors. We manage our bodies at the gym, personal trainers, etc. Want to run a 10K, you're going to get a trainer, you're going to manage your body. We manage our children by going to parenting classes. We do a lot of management of our assets. And yet, have you ever been taught to manage your mind? Or do you think that the thoughts that you think are the boss? Well, they're not. And the sensory input that we receive is meant to drag you out into the world a certain way. Guess what? That's something that you can impact through simple daily practices. So, more about mind management later. Just be aware of your thoughts. Guide them. And this is why I warn you against too much Googling. You know, you get that diagnosis, you Google it, you can be in fearland in no time whatsoever. So don't turn away from it, don't deny it, but you've got to manage the perceptual field that you enter into when you're dealing with a health issue. So these are my tips for you. I hope that they're helpful, and you'll find a PDF on this page so you can print them out, share them with somebody else, put them on your fridge. There'll be more to come along these lines from Yoga Beyond the Poses. I love to teach from my own experience, and I have a lot to teach you, given my experience with my metabolic syndrome. So I'd love to hear from you, your response to this video. Please comment below, download the PDF, and let's have a conversation about staying, not just staying healthy, but thriving, actually embracing the complexity and the incredible accelerated time that we live in. How can we maintain our intuition, learn and practice the time-tested wisdom, use science, and find the right social support so that we can live in the middle of this Venn diagram in the sweet spot for optimal health. Thanks for watching. I look forward to your comments below, and I'll see you again soon.